We regret little things sometimes, but I'm talking about not apologizing for what you believe in, for what you stand for. At a certain point in your life, you have to take a stand and say, this is who I am. This is what I believe in. Other people might not agree with it, or it might seem fuddy-duddy. Who I am, I'm a romantic. That's just what I am. And in the 90s, I think there were people, not just men, but women too, that would be condescending to that idea, that wasn't a cool idea to be romantic. And so at a certain point, even though you believe in something that might not be acceptable or thought of as cool, you have to be unrepentant about it, really, to free your soul. To be free. Let's ask how we're defining feminism. I was born a feminist, so was my daughter, so was my husband. But that's why I married him. I'd say Jesus was a feminist, if you look to the real story, not to the corrupted story, but if you can really get to love your neighbor as yourself. For me, being a feminist means equality. So I'm not just fighting for the woman in the room as a true feminist. I'm fighting for everyone in the room. I'm fighting for the guys, I'm fighting for the girls. I'm fighting for equality. I'm fighting that the best person gets the job. In my mind, feminism is being fair and being as fair as you can and seeing past people's gender, past people's sexuality, which is a big one, I think. And so when you ask me about the definition of feminism, it's important to say that I don't see equality wherever I go. I don't see it all the time. I see people favoring, even if they're not aware of it sometimes. And I have to observe and sit back sometimes and watch that people will favor choosing someone because they're more comfortable, right? And that's just something I'm curious about, why we make those choices. Because it's with us, isn't it? It's with us not being comfortable. So the work must be here. We have to do the work here. And then we can be fair. There's enough girl-on-girl negativity in the industry. Women have been pitted against each other for so long. And it stems from, there was a time at radio when they were only playing one token woman or two of us. And so there was an actual wrestling fight for those positions, a sonic wrestling fight for those positions, which we were driven to have that kind of consciousness. And so it's taken a lot of discipline to get rid of that thought pattern and to balance that idea out with there's room enough for all of us. There is, if you're being unique in yourself and not trying to be somebody else. Most songwriters now, political writers, there isn't, it's not really part of the frame because it's not interesting. Now, if you're singing and talking about very sexual stories, as Prince did in the 80s, but Prince talked about many, many, many things because he is a genius. We're talking about genius. We're not talking about great entertainer, we're talking genius. One of the best, greatest that ever lived, who played everything, wrote everything, sang everything. Everything, the sexuality was very pointed, focused, and clear. So, it's important to say this. We've had then many rockers, men that have been overtly sexual, many, 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 I don't even need to name them. And yet that's been acceptable. That's been okay. So why wouldn't it be okay if we're looking at some of the sexual guys here that aren't necessarily Prince as artists? If we're going to be equal about this, then why wouldn't there be women that are overtly sexual that might not have Prince's complete oeuvre, right? So, who can do everything? Perhaps these women are singers who aren't writing their material. Some of them are dancers as well, incredible dancers. And then this is my question. And I'm not defending anybody, I'm asking you questions. So is it okay for Beyonce to do that, but it's not okay for anybody else to do it? Why? Because she looks like Beyonce? I mean, I guess if I looked like Helen Mirren, I've said, and could move like Beyonce, I'd be sliding on a giant tongue, possibly. But I'm not that person. So it's very important that we're looking at different genres. We're not talking about somebody who's singing about specific stories and then giving you a different behavior physically. It's all lining up. What would confuse me is if you have somebody, what would confuse me if Polly Harvey starts taking her clothes off? Then I would need to sit down and, I don't know, probably have a smoke. A big fatty, just to understand it. Because that wouldn't make sense to me. Why would she do that? And she hasn't, and she won't. I'm not being condescending. I don't understand how taking your clothes off is subversive. To me, that's not subversive. To me, it's kind of G-rated. What you do when you're 20. Stand in line, my angel. We've all played with that. And I'm not saying this to you, I'm saying this to my 20-year-old self. But that isn't subversive, see? That's what you have to understand. It doesn't take... I think what we're talking about is breaking an image and breaking a mold. So if you have an image that is a certain way, and then you change that image, then that can be shocking for people. That's an adjustment because they have placed you in a frame. So you're breaking out of that frame and creating another frame for yourself. Now, I understand that. And sometimes people have to do that. They have to break it in order to recreate themselves so that you don't hang on to their old image. I understand that. That makes sense. I get that. But when you talk to me about being subversive, that's different. Shocking is one thing. Subversive is something else.